number one reason is called stress. And when you see a predator in your life, like a lion or a cougar, you turn on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And the moment you turn on that fight or flight nervous system, you are going to mobilize enormous amounts of energy to prepare yourself for some threat in your external environment. Now, Mexico. This is pretty adaptive. If you're being chased by a lion, you better have the energy. So when that happens, you're moved out of balance. Your pupils dilate, your salivary juices shut off, not a time to eat an enchilada. Your respiratory rate changes, your heart rate changes, and blood is sent to your extremities, and you're either going to run, fight, or hide. That's your three options. Run away, fight back, or freeze and hide. That's what people do. But what if it's not a lion? What if it's your mother-in-law? And you've had some tough experiences with your mother-in-law. Do you know that you'll react to your mother-in-law just like she was a lion? Now, what was once highly adaptive is now very maladaptive. Because as you see the coworker, as you respond to the news, as you make a judgment, as you get angry, you are turning on the same system as if you were being chased by a predator. And you are moving your brain and body out of balance. And the definition of stress is when your body moves out of balance. And all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. The zebra gets chased by the lion. The zebra sees the lion, mobilizes all this energy, and now it escapes the lion. 15 minutes later, it goes back to grazing, and the event is over, and the body returns back to homeostasis. But human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Bills are adding up, rent is overdue, problems at work, and as you think about those problems, you turn on the stress response just by thought alone. And when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, you are headed for some disease. Because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for extended periods of time and expect to function healthily. So then reason this. The scientific facts are that 70% of the time people are living in stress. And when you live in stress, it's not a time to create. When you live in stress, it's not a time to be defined by a vision of the future. When you live in stress, it's not a time to go within or to learn. When you live in stress, all of your attention is on the outer world and not on the inner world because there's danger out there. And so people stop creating when they're living in stress, and now they are viewing their life through a lens of the past, and they lose sight of where they're going. So here's that definition where I talked about of creating different states of being. You react to an experience in your life. If you allow the chemicals to run for hours or days, all of a sudden you say, I'm in a mood. If it lasts for weeks or months, I have a bad temperament. If it lasts for years on end, it's part of my personality. And all you need is one experience to do this, and you'll forget about your vision. So we live in two states of mind. Our animal nature is to live in survival and to live in stress. And the chemicals of stress are highly addictive. Fear, anger, hostility, violence, anxiety, insecurity, guilt, shame, sadness, unworthiness, depression, they are all created from the hormones of stress. When people live by this state, they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm the addiction to that emotion. They need it so they can get the rush of adrenaline. And this is why it's so hard to change. Because it is a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons and create disease. And I just said you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. That means your thoughts can make you sick. So if your thoughts could make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts could make you well? That's what our research is about. And if you know that the hormones of stress are highly addictive, and you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, you can become addicted to your own thoughts. And this is why change is so hard. Because people cling to those emotions because it makes them feel something. So living in survival is living in stress. It's being in what's called catabolism or tissue breakdown. There's disease, there's imbalance, there's degeneration, the emotions of fear and anger and sadness. People tend to be selfish when they live by the hormones of stress because when you're under stress, you got to take care of yourself. So keep putting things bad on the news, keep creating fear, keep showing war, keep people feeling less than, and of course, they'll stay selfish and never create community. It's a great way to control people. When you're living in stress, you focus on three things: everything in your environment, your body, and time. Because if you're being chased by a lion, you're going to put your attention on your body, you're going to become aware of where you're going to run in your environment, and you're going to think about how much time you have. And if you live by the body, the environment, and time, you are not being defined by a vision. Because a vision has nothing to do with your body, the environment, and time. It has to do with a thought. So then you're in emergency mode. You'll get very object-focused. You'll focus on something over and over again. How many people have problems and you keep thinking about your problems over and over again, over and over again? That's how survival works in the brain. You keep focused on your problems. You feel separate from possibility. You define reality with your senses. You're living by cause and effect. You don't see any possibilities. Of course, your brain and heart are incoherent. We've measured this thousands of times. In other words, when you are impatient and you're frustrated and you're angry, your brain gets out of balance. And when your brain gets incoherent, you get incoherent. We measure people's hearts. We just came from a beautiful event in Cabo San Lucas in Los Cabos, 500 people, training them how to train their brain and hearts. When you're impatient and frustrated, your heart gets incoherent. When you feel love and gratitude, your heart gets coherent. When you feel love and gratitude, your brain gets coherent. So then, people in emergency mode focus on knowns. They don't want the unknown. The unknown is dangerous. They want knowns and familiar. They lose their vision. The divine aspect of ourselves are the creative aspect of ourselves. That's when the body moves into homeostasis. We go from contraction to expansion. There's anabolism. There's body repairs itself. There's order. There's health. There's regeneration. The elevated emotions of love and joy, of trust, of knowingness, of gratitude, they begin to produce 1,300 new chemicals that begin to heal the immune system. The hormones of stress produce 1,200 chemicals that last for 90 seconds to 2 minutes that alters how we think and feel. But isn't your definition of an addiction something you can't stop? So if I said, hey, I know you're really angry, but why don't you stop? If you can't stop your anger, then you're addicted. Valid or not, justified or not. If you can't stop your sadness, then you must be addicted to those chemicals. But those chemicals only last for 90 seconds to 2 minutes, which means, I tell my kids this all the time, well, they're older, but when they were younger, if you're angry for more than 2 minutes, you're faking it. So, when you open your heart, you're selfless. When you're in that creative state, you're not defined by things, you're not defined by your body, you're not defined by time. We know this, we've studied it in the brain thousands of times. A creative person forgets that they even have a body. They forget about the things and people in their life. They forget about time. They're in the creative state. And my definition of creation is when you forget about yourself. You go from selfish to selfless. And that's when you're at your best. We've proved it thousands of times. Of course, energy is created. There's always growth and repair. People tend to go from a narrow focus to possibility, to an open focus. They feel connected to their vision. They feel connected to people. They feel connected to something greater. They're already defining reality beyond their senses. They're living no longer as a victim, which means most people think unconsciously that their personal reality is creating their personality. If your personal reality is creating your personality, then you're a victim. But if your personality is creating your personal reality, you're a creator. So now they're causing an effect. They're no longer living by cause and effect. They see possibilities. Brain and heart are in a state of coherence and balance. And of course, they crave the unknown. They want the experience. They want the adventure. They live for it.